Of the 36 paintings in existence commonly attributed to Vermeer, a third are in the USA. Some of these are now highlights at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and also here at the National Gallery of Art, Washington, D.C. Vermeer, the painter of calm interiors, is considered, perhaps more than ever in an increasingly frenetic world, one of the all-time greats, and his paintings are now priceless treasures of these collections. They represent a pinnacle of a glorious period in art known as the Dutch Golden Age. In the mid-1500s, the preeminent power in Europe, flush with gold from the newly discovered American territories, was Spain. And among its domains, on the flat coastal plains adjoining the North Sea, were the provinces of the Netherlands. But in 1568, the Dutch revolted.
What happened was very much like the American Revolution, that the Northerners got tired of taxes and all sorts of intrusions from Spain and wanted to free themselves from that kind of oversight.
Under the leadership of William of Orange, or William the Silent as he was also known, the Dutch successfully created an independent state in the northern provinces of the Netherlands.
It was a moment of great celebration for the Netherlands and the great pride of who they were as a country. I mean, it was huge. It was like they'd beaten back, the small little swampy area, beaten back this greatest power in the world, and who we are, our might and our world power becomes very conscious.
It went further than that. What followed Spanish rule was a republic. No king, no royal court. A Dutch republic that began to rival Spain and England, France and Portugal for the title of the greatest colonial power. The world leader in trade, science and art.
This is a new and democratic and more open economy based in urban manufacturing, the two most important industries being the manufacture of cloth, linen, canvas, cotton, and so on. And supporting that is the number two reason is the great merchant marine of the Netherlands. And the ships were always full, going in both directions. And they were great middlemen in terms of their produce. For example, they would get wool from the Baltic countries and they would finish it into bolts of cloth on a large scale. And this merchant marine empire stretched all the way to China and ultimately Japan, throughout South America, and of course they were right here in New York, which was New Amsterdam back in those days.
The northern provinces of the Netherlands, including the province of Holland, were full of bustling canals, ports and dockyards. In 1659, Vermeer painted this wonderful view of his native city, a city full of beautiful, expensive, well-furnished houses.
Where you would have in other countries the kings and queens or the emperors that would buy paintings, not to forget the church. In the Dutch Republic, there was like a large group of people that made a lot of money, so rich burghers, citizens, and they would have paintings. They would really fill up their house with paintings.
This is remarkable. The average house in Amsterdam in the 1650s had 10 paintings in it. This is not true for Manhattan today. And the reason in the global, the big picture, would be that the main way you would hold wealth in another country, land, is basically unavailable in Holland. It's remarkable how urban this culture is. About 75% of the entire population lived in cities or towns. If you went to France in the 1800s, it would be 90% agrarian. So this is really very different.
Extraordinary commercial success had created a middle class who desired to have paintings in their homes. It is estimated that between 1600 and 1700, some 5 million paintings were produced. And this was the Dutch Golden Age, for that incredible demand led to an abundance of superb painters. from contemporary travellers to the Dutch Republic remarked in surprise at the sheer volume of painting to be had there, and in astonishment at the people who seemed to be buying them. It was commonplace for blacksmiths or cobblers, merchants or bankers to adorn their homes and shops with artworks. This was something unique in Europe, art commissioned not by a court of kings and courtiers, but by wealthy, and indeed not so wealthy, businessmen. And what they wanted was a reflection of their own lives.
This work shows a finely dressed young woman standing at a virginal, her outward gaze an invitation to the viewer to come and join her in making music. The scene is set in a Delft interior, typical of Vermeer, as light spills from a window on the left and onto a floor of black and white tiles. The woman plays a musula virginal, an instrument usually played standing up. Unlike the virginal scene in the music lesson, or the ruckus one in the gallery, both featuring a printed motto, this more deluxe version has a painted landscape on the lid, done in the style of a Delft contemporary. The instrument maker would leave certain areas blank, allowing their clients to commission artists to decorate the virginal, often doubling its price. Behind the young woman, on the back wall, are two paintings, a small landscape and an image of Cupid holding a playing card, signifying faithfulness in love.
Now, I've been joined again by exhibition curator Betsy Wiesman. Betsy, this room is filled with women playing musical instruments, of which perhaps the most supreme example is this one. What do we know about the women in general and this woman in particular? I mean, is this a portrait? Is this a fantasy? Do we know anything about them? Are they generic?
I think it may be a little bit of everything. I think Vermeer based the figures in his paintings perhaps on family members or professional models or friends who would have stood for the paintings. But I think they're intentionally generalized and idealized so that we can't relate them to a specific person. There's no way looking at this that we can mistake it for a portrait. It might bear a generic resemblance to someone, but I think the intent is to make it intentionally vague and anonymous, if you will, so that perhaps we can project ourselves into the painting a little better.
The other thing that immediately strikes you is the paintings within the painting, but in particular the painting on the lid of the virginal. Why would the virginal have had that particular landscape, for example, painted on it?
Well, I think a lot of musical instruments had landscapes like this decorating them because it was something pleasant to look at. Sometimes they have mythological figures or people having a picnic, things like that. Pleasant pastoral associations. The paintings here, both the painting on the background wall and the one decorating the lid of the virginal, are done by Vermeer in the style of one of his Delft contemporaries, a landscape painter. Sometimes they have printed mottos on the lid, but a more expensive option would be to hire a painter to paint a landscape or another scene that you recommended to them.
Just looking at this, in his lifetime, would this painting have been more valuable than the virginal that he paints with a landscape on it? Or in the culture of Delft at the time, would the instrument itself have been more valued?
I think the instrument would have cost more. virginals like this would have been incredibly expensive and owned only by, the very well-to-do. And we know from the inventory of Vermeer's possessions that he, in fact, did not own a virginal like this.
On April the 20th, 1653, the 20-year-old Johannes Vermeer married Katharina Bollners, the daughter of a respectable and wealthy Catholic family. Given Vermeer's financial circumstances and prospects following his father's death a few months before, this was a fortuitous match. Katharina's mother, Maria Tins, was reluctant to give consent for the marriage, but in the end relented. Perhaps only when the Protestant Vermeer agreed to convert to Catholicism.
This question of religion is important for Vermeer because he grew up Protestant but converted to Catholicism in order to marry the woman he loved. And then he lives in his mother-in-law's house, which is interesting for Vermeer's economy because the mother-in-law was moderately wealthy and had a 4-story house. So the question of housing and even food was in part taken care of for Vermeer. He was the person who would guide visitors to the Catholic chapel in the neighborhood. The Dutch Catholics, perhaps 30% in Delft, worshipped mostly in chapels within private houses. And Vermeer's own painting, The Allegory of the Catholic Faith, the one rather realistic thing about the picture, the female figure who's an allegory of the faith itself and a globe under her feet, she dominates the world. She's looking up at a glass sphere which symbolizes heaven. But the surprising thing is the setting itself. It's not a church or something allegorical. It looks like the room in an ordinary house that was, on a rather impromptu basis, set up as a Catholic church. A tapestry on the floor used as a rug and a table which is modified into an altar by a blue cloth thrown over it. And this really reflected the conditions of Catholic worship in the Netherlands. It had to be in private.
We were a Calvinist country and all the churches were whitewashed, so there were no paintings ordered for churches. And with the new clientele, so to say, so new people ordering paintings, they would order portraits. And of course this is not something new, but because there were so many different people ordering portraits, then the artist also had to make up a new genre of portraits. So because everybody wanted to have different portraits. And I think what is important, because there were so many artists, they had to have like niche markets, because if everybody would make the same paintings, then, it wouldn't work.
Living in his mother-in-law's home, Vermeer set to work in his first-floor studio. Here, the stage was set for the production of the delicately lit domestic interiors for which he is so renowned. The marriage, too, was productive. Over the years, Vermeer would father 15 children, between 7 and 11 of whom seem to have survived infancy.
The house he lived in was not that big, so there must have been a room where we could close the door and make his paintings, because I cannot imagine, making what he did with the noise of, young children, because I come from a very large family myself, so I have a lot of brothers and sisters, and it was very difficult to find a quiet room in the house where we lived, and we had a very large house. So I can relate in that aspect to Vermeer, but then when you would look at his paintings, then it's so quiet.
Interestingly, this is the only painting that has children in it. Are they Vermeer's own? We'll never know. No names, no explanations survive for any of his subjects. What is apparent is a stillness, maybe a peace that never existed in his own household. And it was these somewhat peaceful domestic scenes that Vermeer concentrated on for the rest of his life.
Out of a probable 50 paintings that Vermeer made during his lifetime, just 36 survive to the present day. So it's a rare moment that Vermeers from different collections are brought together. Rarer still because the guitar player from Kenwood House in London is so fragile that it never travels, and so has never been part of a Vermeer exhibition before.
The Kenwood House picture has been physically here in the gallery for the past year or so while Kenwood House has been closed for repairs. So we've had this honored guest in the galleries. But this is the first time that we've seen the three paintings together. It's really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You know, just to have those three pictures and no other paintings together on the wall, I think that makes it even more powerful, just because that's what you're focusing on. And it's almost as if you're in the artist's studio and you see the paintings lined up, you know, as he's finishing them. What's been so fascinating about doing this exhibition is just getting that better sense of the artist at work and his thought process as he's doing different interpretations of the theme of music in these wonderful little genre pictures. It's amazing to see the three paintings together. I mean, it just sort of comes over you like a wave. You know, it's a very moving moment.